everyone, it's John from What Up, and welcome back to another video. And this is going to be my Season 2, Episode 3 breakdown video. We're going to walk through the episode all the way from start to finish. We'll talk about every scene, we'll break them down, talk about what's going on there, differences between the books and the show, things they're pointing to, little nods here and there, and where the storylines are going to be going. And I'll give a few explanations for things that maybe aren't quite as clearly defined as possible. And then, of course, we're going to talk about that scene. Yes, that scene. We're going to talk about that scene. We 100% are. But I don't want to get into it till after the spoiler warning. So, if you're new to the channel and you don't know what we're doing here, we cover Wheel of Time show news. Pretty much anything and everything related to the Wheel of Time is what we talk about. So if you like that sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're doing news, we're doing leaks, we're doing all kinds of different things on a daily basis. But right now we're doing reviews, Easter eggs, and breakdowns of every single episode of Season 2 of the Wheel of Time. And when Season 2 is done, I have a ton of stuff for you folks. Most of it being leaks, some of it being news, but there's going to be a lot of content coming from the channel in the next few months. So if you like Wheel of Time, and if you like Wheel of Time content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now, before we get into the video, I do want to give a bit of a spoiler warning, because since we're going to walk through the episode start to finish, we're going to talk about the book series as well. It's going to be a fairly hefty spoiler rating for this. So, spoiler warning, we're doing a breakdown of episode 3 of season 2 of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time. So if you have not read all of the books, we're talking The Eye of the World up to A Memory of Light, all 14 books of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series, and have not seen the full first season and the first 3 episodes of the second season of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time shows streaming right now on Prime Video, be forewarned, I'm ruining major plot points and character arcs from both of those mediums. Alright, all that being said, let's get to the breakdown. Alright, so we start off with Nynaeve going in through the arches for her testing of becoming accepted. These scenes were done so well, and they mirror the books in so many different ways. There are a few small changes here and there, of course, and we have to get through to those, but the dialogue here when she's first going into the arches is basically ripped right from the page. It's like word for word from the book series. It is fantastic. Now, there are different people in the room, of course, when Nynaeve goes through her accepted testing, and the archways that she encounters are slightly different as well, but this scene was done so well. It was a great opportunity for Zoe Robbins to showcase her acting chops as Nynaeve, and she just absolutely kills it, as far as I'm concerned. Going through this, the pain, the loss, the fear, the gamut of emotions she ran through in this, I absolutely just thoroughly loved. But it's when we get into the arches and you see the specifics that are happening behind them that really gets me excited. All right, so the first arch that she goes through is for the past. So basically you go through 3 arches, one for past, one for present, one for future. Now, in the show, basically she's going into the past and she is a child again. She has her mother, her father, they are still alive, and she has to choose to leave them. So every single one of the archways deals with an aspect of loss. You have to choose to come back to the Aes Sedai, to the White Tower, over what is happening there, either to help people or to stay happy, one or the other. This scene in the books, this very first archway, was her fighting Agenor. Now, Agenor wasn't included in the show whatsoever. He is one of the weaker Forsaken, and in fact, he's the one responsible for most of the Shadow Spawn. He was a geneticist, so he created the Trollocs, the Murdral, the Fades, the Drehakar, the Golem, the Worms. He created pretty much every Shadow Spawn you could think of, and in fact, a lot of the other Forsaken thought he was just a little too unstable. But he had a very short, I'm going to say cameo in the books, because he really wasn't around a whole lot. He was in the Eye of the World for a very brief period of time before he was destroyed, and then he was referenced here and there much later, of course, but Agenor wasn't in the books for very long, so they didn't include him in the show. So they couldn't really go through the first archway and have Nynaeve fight someone who didn't exist in the show. So instead, they made the choice between her trying to protect her parents. Now, Nynaeve was orphaned at a very young age, and she was raised by the Wisdom and the Two Rivers. It's part of the reason she became a Wisdom, and this is sort of throwing back to making that same choice of becoming an orphan a second time, leaving her parents to die, and going back to the Aes Sedai. Incredibly dramatic moments, and I really enjoyed watching it. The second archway mirrors her second archway in the books fairly well. So essentially in the book series, Nynaeve went through and she found out that there was another Wisdom handling things within the Two Rivers, and she was doing a terrible job and treating people terribly. And her choice was she had to leave the people of the Two Rivers behind and not help them and leave them in the hands of this terrible Wisdom. The differences in this scene versus the book series is the fact they used Natty Cawthon as the Wisdom, which I thought was great. I really loved seeing a lot of the Two Rivers folk in the first episode of season 1. I personally don't think that they spent enough time with a couple of them, and some of the character arcs definitely need redemption arcs, in my opinion. But I love seeing Natty again on screen. Juliet Howland, the actress who plays her, is fantastic, and she channels a perfect show Natty Cawthon in this episode versus what we've seen in the first few episodes of the first season. I thought it was really great, and she's basically just killing everyone. Somebody gets sick, and yeah, too bad, so sad. We're going to ease your pain till you die. We're not going to cure you. And Nynaeve has to make the choice between staying and trying to help the people of the Two Rivers or going back to the Aes Sedai. Another incredibly difficult choice for her. But she does make the choice to go back, but it really, really breaks her to do so. All right, next up is the Third Arch. It mirrors her pathway through the books a little bit, but we're going to get into that later on when we talk about the actual scenes. First, we get this glimpse of her kind of dealing with something. She's in a red dress, she has a red Aja ring on, and there are a lot of different scenes of Lan and others being chopped up with axes and being killed, and she's incredibly upset, comes out of the archway in covered in blood, and basically renounces being an Aes Sedai. She leaves the tower, she meets with Egwene, says she doesn't need her protector anymore, meets Lan outside the tower, and at that point, you realize, because you see the arches behind her, that she's still in the arches. Her exiting the archway at the beginning of this scene was not real. It was part of her trial. And when it disappears behind her, you're left for the majority of the episode wondering what's going to happen. I thought this was a neat way to bookend it with Nynaeve, starting with Nynaeve and ending with Nynaeve in this episode. I thought it was really great. And it definitely mirrored what happened in the Third Archway in the book series. But we will get to that later on when we come back to Nynaeve near the end of the episode. Right, so this scene isn't really in the book series, but it is one of the most powerful scenes of this third episode, and the one that everyone was absolutely talking about. So, in this particular scene, we got to see a few different things. First one is, this is the aftermath of the battle. So, the Seanchan came into the river village at night in the last episode, episode 2, and they attacked them. The Shienarans basically held their own until the Damane entered the fray, and at that point, well, the one power trumps even Shienarans soldiers. They were all captured. The following morning, they're split up into 2 separate groups. So, in these shots, you'll notice that on the left-hand side are all the men, on the right-hand side are all the women. Essentially, what they're doing is they're separating them, so when the Damane walks through, she can actually actively pick out all the women that can channel. Remember, the Seanchan don't believe women who can channel are real people. They're basically a tool to be used. So they hold festivals every year where they test everyone, and then if you have the ability, if you have the spark, you become a Damane and you are no longer a person. That's what they're doing here. They brought all these traditions with them across the Earth Ocean, and they're basically reclaiming land that was once theirs, and they're doing the same thing to women who can channel here. So the women they pick out of the crowd are women who have the spark, the innate ability born into them to channel. Then they ask everyone to take the oaths, and this is a very big departure from the book series, but very true to his character and something that everyone was very upset about. Uno refused to take the oaths, and he basically told them to go pound sand in much more colorful language. And they kneeled him down, and they put his head through a horn, killing him, and then swearing the oaths in his name afterwards. This was something that unless you had advanced knowledge or you had some sort of inkling from production that this would happen, it was a shock to almost all the fandom. Now, am I totally surprised they killed off a character like Uno? Absolutely not. Yes, Uno is a character that makes it right through to the last battle. Yes, he is a fan favorite, but his actions throughout the series can be very easily replaced with any number of combination of characters, and you have to understand we're introducing a ton of new characters. So this season alone, they've introduced already a bunch, at least a half dozen new characters this season, and they're going to keep doing that every other season. There's 2,782 named characters in the series. They're going to have to amalgamate or just not introduce some characters or remove other characters in order to make way for it. Again, not a scene that was in the books, but a truly gruesome and absolutely noteworthy scene to talk about it. I said it before, this is our Ned Stark scene, and I've had some pushback on that. I've had people say, well, Ned was a point of view character and Uno was not. Well, I'm not talking about the fact that it was a point of view character. I'm talking about the fact that Uno was a fan favorite that no one expected to die. This was just as shocking as far as anyone in the fandom was concerned. But either way, really great scene with a ton of implications for the future. Next, we get to see Rand and Logain. This was some of the promotional material we've already seen. We've seen some cold open, some parts of the episode. I've already covered this on the channel. But essentially, this scene is not something that truly happened in the book series either, but it references some stuff that does. So essentially, in the book series In the Eye of the World, Logain was paraded through the streets of Cairhien. Cairhien is the capital city of Andor. Mat and Rand were both there. Rand was watching procession, and Logain saw him. And when Logain saw him, he saw this bright glow around him. And this bright glow indicated that Rand was Ta'veren, and the most strong Ta'veren that Logain's ever seen, because he has a talent for seeing Ta'veren. He knew he would shake the world. It was never described how he knew that's what it meant, how he found out about the talent, if anyone trained him. It was just one of those things that he knew this, and it was kind of accepted and left alone at that. What they're doing in the show is they're doing something a little bit different. You had two Ta'verens standing next to one another. You had Rand and Mat. You couldn't really have Mat glow at the same time because then it would kind of get away from the mystery of who's the Dragon Reborn at that point in the first season. So I think they shifted a little bit to men can see a glow around other men who can channel, which is not a change that I'm terribly upset about at all, because in the book series you can only tell by the sheer amount of menace coming off of them, which is an incredibly hard thing to show in a visual medium. So showcasing a glow like this, yeah, I can understand it. Also, Rand is setting him up here to be an instructor, and this is part of the reason why I think he's going to be amalgamated with someone else who does actually instruct Rand in the books, Asmodean, because rather than introducing another Forsaken that is only a little blip on the radar, we're keeping more of the main villains intact, and we get to see Rand being trained by Logain instead. That's the idea anyway. I'm not 100% sure if this is actually going to come to fruition, but I think it would be a good change from the books. Now we cut to Egwene and Elaine in the tower, and this scene is the start of what I believe to be part of the defining moments of Egwene's character in season 2. This is where she finds out that Nynaeve never exited the Arches, and she is determined to mount a rescue effort to go into the Arches to try to find out what they can do to rescue Nynaeve. She is told unequivocally it's impossible, it's never happened, she can't do it, and she doesn't listen. We'll see that later on in the episode, and we'll talk about it then, but it goes right to the core of her character, where she does not listen to people when they say things are impossible. She does not listen to when people say she shouldn't do things or it's not going to work out. She tries anyway, because that's at the core of what she is, and if she has to do something that's impossible to help one of her friends, she is absolutely going to do so. Egwene's character development kind of carries on in this scene here, because she's confronting Liandrin, someone who is far above her station, who is far more powerful than her, and she actually attacks her with the one power because she's upset with her. This is 100% something Egwene from the books would have done, and I loved seeing the progression of her character throughout this episode, because it really went to the core of what she normally would do for her friends and her family. Now we get to see Mat. This is the second time we saw Mat. I didn't talk about his first scene because basically it was just Liandrin and him speaking, and Liandrin just kind of let him go. Now we get to see something here that some people don't think is in Mat's character, where he sees Egwene upset and he just ignores her and kind of walks away. This is where he's escaping Tar Valon. He's basically going with Min and they're leaving Tar Valon. In my opinion, this is 100% Mat's character motivations at this point in the story. Remember, he's still being affected by the dagger. He had the initial healing from Moraine in season 1. The dagger's been mentioned a couple of times so far in season 2. But we know from promotional material and from leaks that he has scenes with the dagger much later. He is likely not fully healed from it. And I can tell you that in season 3, he is back in the White Tower again. So he at this point is still distrusting. The dagger still has a hold on him. He is not the Mat that you know and love. Yes, we're seeing glimpses and flashes of him here and there, but he is not what you would expect, because post-dagger Mat doesn't happen until after the Dragon Reborn, when he's healed in the White Tower, and that's when we start really seeing him have that huge sense of justice. Before that, he was mean, he was deceitful, he was not himself, and we've seen a little bit of that in season 1. But remember, he's still under the influence here. This is 100% likely what he would do at this point. Either way, he is at this point fleeing Tar Valon with Min. Now, you have to understand that during the Great Hunt, he was not in Tar Valon at all. He was actually still with the Shienarans, and he should be at this point in Cairhien with Rand. And I think they're setting up for him to go to Cairhien to meet Rand and Moraine and progress that part of the storyline to get them all to Falme. Now, in this particular scene, we get to see Rand and Selene actually attending one of the nobles' parties in Cairhien. Now, there's a couple of nods to the books here. The first thing I want to talk about is this absolutely amazing coat that Rand's wearing. It mirrors the coat that's on the cover of Fires of Heaven by Daryl Sweet. So that's the artist that did the cover for Fires of Heaven, the original artwork, actually. And it was a huge nod to the fans. I get very excited when I see this coat. I think a lot of other people did too. But at this point during the show, he is attending this party with Selene, and he is basically there to sort of get his hands on a bottle of wine more than anything else, because Geldin Reds are hard to get. While he's there, he's actually invited to another nobleman's house. Now, this is the invitation that Selene is handing him here, and then he just kind of burns it. So in the book series, at this point, Rand is in Cairhien. He's there with Varen Sedai, the Shinerans, and Mat, and they find out that the horn and the dagger is in Lord Barthane's manor. So Rand has been getting invitations this entire time. He's not with Selene. He was only with Selene on the road. She's not actually in Cairhien with him in the books. And he's been getting invitations from nobility all the time because they think he's an outland lord, sort of kind of slumming it just a little bit, and they're trying to figure out how they can use him. And it gets all the way up to the point where he gets an invitation to Lord Barthane's manor, and they see it as Ta'veren using the pattern to their advantage, and they use that to go there to look for the horn and the dagger. Here, that's a nod to that because he's gotten his first invitation from one of the nobles in Cairhien. I think that we're going to see him and Moiraine meet up here, and then he's going to use this part of Dostimar, or the Game of Houses, to sort of weasel his way in to Lord Barthane's manor, because we know that Lord Barthane's is cast for this season, to find out to see if the horn or the dagger is there, or perhaps to get to the Waygate to get to Falme. That's my guess anyway. Back to Logain and Rand, he brings him the wine, and he's basically asking for his help to be taught the One Power. And this is where it kind of puts some doubts into the idea that Logain may be teaching him the One Power rather than Asmodean, like in the book series, because Logain's pretty far gone in the madness. The taint has a hold of him quite well. Remember, he's a bit older than Rand. He's been channeling the One Power for a far longer period of time before he was gentled. So the madness actually has a hold of him. During the first season, he was talking to voices and people that were not there. He is not entirely in his right mind at all. That would make it difficult for him to teach, I think, plus the fact that he does not have the ability to channel right now, unless they're going to move up the timeline of Logain's ability being healed by Nynaeve by a fair bit. Maybe, just maybe, he won't be teaching Rand, and this is just sort of a subplot to try to turn the reader's attention away from that. I'm not entirely sure about that. We know that he's not replacing Master Tame, because Tame has already been mentioned in the show as being a powerful channeler from Saldea. So I'm not quite sure where this particular storyline is going. Maybe he will take over Asmodean's spot and teach Rand without the ability to channel, or maybe he'll get healed early and be able to teach Rand while channeling. Either way, I'm happy for Logain. Alvaro Morte is an excellent actor, and I'm glad to see him on screen, and I don't think Logain get enough page time in the books. Next up, we have Perrin. He's in chains after the capture of the Seanchan, and they're taking him to Falme. Now, Ishamael meets him here, and this is one of those things. I think this is going to be a little bit of a departure from the books, at least with Perrin's Wolf Brother abilities, because in the book series, Perrin meets a gentleman by the name of Gnome, and Gnome is basically gone completely Wolf Brother. He is a wolf in a man's form, and has lost all semblance of being a man. That scares Perrin a lot, and it lets him limit his contact with the wolves and limit his abilities in embracing being a wolf brother, because he's scared that'll happen to him. We haven't seen Gnome yet in this particular iteration on the show, so I'm wondering if perhaps Ishamael saying the more you are with the wolves, the closer you are to me, is sort of kind of maybe going to put that seed of fear in Perrin's mind's eye, and that's why he's not going to want to embrace being a wolf brother too quickly, so he's scared he'll open himself up further to the dark. Either way, really great scene seeing this. Elias kind of jumps in at this point with blood all over his face because he's torn the throat out of a Seanchan soldier with his teeth and rescues Perrin. I loved Perrin in the books, and so far some of the Perrin scenes have been my absolute favorite in the show, and I can't wait to see him actually interact with the wolves and Elias and come into his own as a wolf brother. Next up, we get a scene with Min and Liandra. Now, this scene is a little out of place in my opinion, but I'm wondering where it's going to go. So, she is working with a known dark friend. Now, of course, people who just watch the show and don't read the books don't 100% at this point know Liandra is a dark friend. They just know they probably don't like her as much as they possibly should. And Min is working with her to take Mat somewhere. So again, Mat had to get out of the tower in this particular season. I understand they likely had to rewrite a lot of the scripts considering Barney Harris left, and they had to rewrite him going back and staying at the tower rather than being in Fal Dara with everyone else starting there. I think the original draft scripts probably had him with Perrin and the Shienarans, which makes total sense to me. So in this episode, this is Min taking him out of the tower on behest of Liandrin. So I'm not quite sure where this particular storyline is going, other than perhaps going to lead up to Cairhien and Falm, where Mat rather needs to be, because he does blow the horn this season, and he does lead the Heroes of the Horn in Falm, because we've already seen that in official promotional material. We've already kind of spoiled that in a commercial. So really neat scene to see this interaction here, and it's causing a lot of the audience, especially people in the audience who haven't read the books before, to distrust Min just a little bit. We talked about this earlier when Egwene is doing the impossible to help her friends. She was told outright that it is impossible to rescue someone from the Arches. There's never been a successful attempt ever, and that she also knows it would take more than one Aes Sedai to open these Arches, more power than she has the ability and more training than she has, and yet here she is trying anyway to open the Arches to go in after Nynaeve without even really knowing how they work. This is Egwene. Like, I can't say this more times than enough during this particular video. This is the core of her character in the books, and they've done a fantastic job of showcasing that on screen, because this is just what she does for the entire book series, and she's likely going to continue to do it throughout the screen. The people in charge of bringing Egwene's character to life in the writer's room, they have done a top-notch job as far as I'm concerned. All right, and we actually get to bookend this episode with Nynaeve. So we started with Nynaeve, and we're ending with Nynaeve, and this is the third archway. So she is here. This is years in the future. Her daughter is 7 or 8 years old. She's been married to Lan for a long time. She's in the Two Rivers. Perrin and Mat have joined her there, and everybody dies. So this mirrors what happens in the books a fair bit. So in the third archway in the books, she is in the future. She is married to Lan. They are in a revived Malkir. They have a family, and she has to choose to leave all of that to come behind. A little bit different here. They're in the Two Rivers instead. And during the scene, Lan, Mat, and Perrin are killed in pretty gruesome ways, and Mat and Perrin's deaths has a little bit of foreshadowing to them, because Mat has lost an eye. I mentioned it in my Easter egg video. It references giving up half the light of the world to save the other half, which is a prophecy surrounding him in the book series, and he actually does lose his eye there. Also, the fact that Perrin died by a giant battle axe, that's just pure poetry as far as I'm concerned, because Perrin's still looking for his axe. The fandom is all very excited for when he gets it. I have my own theory on that. I think that he's going to pick up Ingtar's axe at the end of the Battle of Falm, because Ingtar's been carrying one and not really, it's been showcased a couple of times throughout the season. I think he's going to pick it up after Ingtar falls, but that's just my guess either way. Now, this particular scene, after everyone's dead, Nynaeve grabs her daughter and the archway comes back, and she chooses to try to take her daughter out through the archway, knowing full well that likely it's not going to work. She escapes the archway. She's covered in blood when she gets out, but she does not have her daughter. So she had to give up her entire family in the last living bit of her to get out back to the Aes Sedai and to the White Tower. Absolutely destroys her. A very emotional end to the episode, and I thought it was filmed very well. All right, so folks, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Like I said in my review, I gave it a 9. I thought it was a spot on, probably the best episode of Wheel of Time that we've had from both seasons. Really, really good. Some huge shockers in here for the fans, things that most people didn't see coming. I don't think anyone really who didn't have inside or advanced knowledge knew that Uno was going to die. And it was a big shock and a big blow to the community, I think. Guy Roberts was fantastic doing that role. The way they portrayed the Seanchan was perfect. I think the character arcs in this particular episode were all spot on as well. And I really liked the pacing. Everything was just good TV for this particular episode. But I want to hear your thoughts on it down below. I can't wait for the next few episodes to see where the storyline goes. Thank you so much for sticking with us here to the very end. Here's to many more.